Okay, greetings everyone. My name is Andrew Justice Fritz. I am the Ag and Community Programs Manager with the Placer Resource Conservation District. And I am going to run through a number of the steps involved in putting and constructing and building out this accessible raised bed. But first I wanted to start with a brief introduction just about how this came about, laying out some of the goals of what this design of this accessible raised bed is trying to achieve, and then run through just some basic overall components to kind of show you how we achieve some of our goals. And so first, I want to thank the Placer Resource Conservation District for allowing me the time and space to put something like this together. I also want to thank the National Association of Conservation Districts, which made an urban ag grant available to our district so that we had the time and capacity to develop things like this for our community. And in presenting this did a recent presentation of this accessible raised bed, and it kind of low-key exploded, and people were really interested in the design of it and in the construction plans. And so here they are. And I also want to thank my previous employer, actually the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District in Indiana, because this is where I initially started the plans, and we actually built one of these beds, the initial model, and this is the updated version of it. And that was also through an urban grant initiative through NACD. And so, and all of that in combination with some resources online that inspired this design, I'd just like to thank everyone involved. This doesn't just come from my brain, it comes from many different brains and hearts. So here we are. So this is the accessible raised bed in model form. And its key goal, its number one goal, was to increase the accessibility for those who are differing abled, who might use a wheelchair, or those who prefer benefit from standing while gardening, who maybe can't lean over nearly as well. And it's in response to some other accessible raised beds that I've seen that folks have built, some that I've seen in retail locations that don't pass the muster, my own personal metric for really truly being accessible. And also in our second goal was longevity. They weren't designed to necessarily last a long time. And so number one, we want to increase the accessibility to people. And we do that through a V-shaped design of the garden bed, as you can see here, which allows someone to kind of scoot underneath it as if it's a table. This is different than other accessible raised beds where the bed may be higher, but you have to if you're a wheelchair, you have to go kind of parallel to it, to the side of it, and you don't really have full range of motion to be able to work efficiently in the space. Also, I've seen some other beds that are kind of flat underneath, and so there's not as much root depth. And what this V-shaped design does is it allows the roots to go deeper. So there's just more soil, there's more soil depth. The roots will kind of hit the sides, and then they'll go down deeper into the garden bed. And so accessibility-wise, we think this is an improvement. It's not the best. There are still limitations. And so I leave it up to you to decide, what you want to do with this to help meet the needs of your own community. For example, does it need to be shorter? You can cut this out. Maybe the V shape is a little bit different. Maybe it only needs to be access on one side. Maybe it only needs to be 4 feet instead of the full 8 feet. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this. Also, for those who are working from a wheelchair, having shorter plants is ideal. If they want to work on taller plants like heirloom tomatoes, that's probably best done in a pot. But this is ideal for shorter plants. I would use compact varieties of tomatoes and peppers if that's desirable. But for those who are standing next to the bed, next to our model Chris here, Chris could easily have tall tomatoes and be at eye level with them, which would be fantastic. And so the second goal was to increase its longevity by decreasing its susceptibility to decay and rot over time. A lot of the beds I saw were not protected at all. They would fall apart. The weight of the soil would bow over time because of the weight. and fall apart relatively quickly within even a year or two. And if it's not sealed, if there isn't considerations taken into protecting the wood from rotting, then you're going to have some complications. So that will kind of go into my next kind of model here. This is the same model, just a different scene, and it's color coded. That's in the codedness of it is in coordination with the instructions that you can download from the link in the description. So I'll just go over some of the major components of it. You have your side legs, you have a middle leg, you have a support beam right here, which is a 4x6 piece of wood. You have the support brackets, then you have the caps that go over the top right here. And on the inside, what's not illustrated is there will be a plastic lining that's food safe inside here, and then a drain pipe right here. And so we'll go to that drain. The drain pipe allows for infiltration, so that way the soil doesn't get so heavy and waterlogged at the bottom. And if there's roots at the bottom, they don't become waterlogged as well. But a nice feature of this is you can set a bucket or a pail underneath here, capture the excess water, and then and also the nutrients that will be leaching out from the soil, and use it to re-water your garden bed, which I think is really cool. Here is the lining that will go in. So they're not. This is a color code, but this will be black plastic, and then there will be an HDPE sheets right here with a little bit of silicone caulking and a special screw and washer. But that is to protect the plastic lining from being damaged by garden trowels and that kind of thing. Right here. Another thing that's been really taken into account is the placement of all the screws. So screws are going to be what holds this thing together, and they're indicated by these raised bumps, these raised cylinders essentially, and the colors are associated with the type of screw, which is also in your instruction packet. And so the screws have been placed as best as they can to minimize exposure to moisture and water. Now it's not perfect, but that leads to actually the third goal, which is we wanted this to be able to be built by most people. So if you have even mild or novice confidence and skill in constructing and building things, this should be able to be built by you. It may be a challenge, but hopefully the instructions kind of help guide you through the way, or you have someone else that you can lean on. But overall, this whole design should be able to be built by using most tools that most people have. The most significant tool you'll need is a table saw, because there will be a few items that need to be ripped, meaning they have to be cut lengthwise with the grain of the wood. A miter saw, a drill, and some other tools which we also have in the instruction packet, all of which you can either borrow from someone or purchase at relatively low cost, except for the major tools. And so that's the intro. And so next we're going to head into how we put this thing together. Okay, we're going to head into the more detailed explanations of each of the steps in building out the accessible raised bed. What you're looking at here is a drain pipe. You can build this actually whenever you'd like. I'm just starting off with it first. It'll actually be the last thing that you install once everything else is built out. So just to give you kind of a quick layout, you have a 1-inch PVC pipe, and you have a 1-inch cap, a 1-inch male threaded piece right here, and then you have a bulkhead. Plan ahead. You'll probably need to purchase the bulkhead, but all these other parts you can get at your local hardware store. Overall, it's 7 foot 5 7/8 inch. That can fudge a little bit. It just has to fit inside the raised bed. One thing that's not on here that needs some explaining is that with drains, there's usually a filter sock that slides over the drain. You may have seen these before. So I have spec'd out one that should fit over this really easily. It'll actually be too big, and that's okay. As long as it filters out sediment and as long as water can still pass through it, that's all we need. but it will need to be secured with some zip ties on each end to hold it on securely, but also to prevent sediment from coming in the open ends over time. One other thing to note too is these are 1/2 inch holes. I've spaced them here every 4 inches, but you can do it however you want. And so once you buy your 1-inch PVC, you will need to drill holes in it since it's such a unique piece and component. I really wanted it to match up with a bulkhead that created a nice tight seal between the inside of the raised bed and the outside. So that's why this piece right here is really important. You're welcome to fashion your own device however you see fit, but it was really important to have a nice, good, secure fit there. You will need some PVC cement as well to make sure these caps, both the male thread here and this cap works. So from there, you actually head into now starting to build the raised bed. And this is the inside of one of the side legs. And this is the same step you'll do for actually both side legs. And we're actually missing the screws right here. We should have those screws on, which I will turn them on right now. Boom. And actually we can, well, we'll just leave that on. But each piece is 40 inches, 3 foot 4 inches, or 40 inches. And I have marked out the lumber pieces right here. So this is a 2x6, a 2x6, a 2x8, and so on and so forth. These gray pieces are 2x4s, and then the support beam brackets are also 2x4s. I've put the yellow screws in here, 2 per board, and I'm actually missing one right there and missing one right there. But you get the idea that there's 2 per board. You can put 3 in if you like. I've just spec'd 2 for here now. And the total height is 2'7" and 7/8 to the top of the inner leg here, the gray. And that is pretty much it. Again, keeping things as precise as possible is going to help in the long run, because you make one little flub here, you might be able to make it up in the next step, but it tends to kind of snowball. This support beam bracket is obviously where the support beam goes, and so make sure that as you cut it out that your support beam will fit inside of here. Also to note, for design reasons, I left a 1/8 inch gap between all these boards right here. It worked dimension wise, which is partly why I did it, but I like the look of it. You can probably change up the dimensions, but you'll have to change it up, or change up the gap. You'll have to change it up and everywhere else too. It'll snowball and get really messed up. So in that case, you may want to put extra screws in here. Okay, and then going over to the bow side. So now we're looking, so you do the same thing of what I just described onto this leg. But this is just showing the bow side where your drain hole comes out. And all these dimensions go to the center of the drain. So it's a 1 7/8 inch hole. Again, it's 40 inches wide. And this is to be built out. Everything's the same as the other side, except for this hole. Okay, so now for the support beam, I've just labeled it here. It does not need to be cut, unless for some reason it's longer than 96 inches or 8 feet long. So, so definitely, measure it out, make sure it should be 96 inches. If it's not, if it's a little over even 96 1/8, go ahead and trim off that 1/8 of an inch. If it's shorter, that's fine. Everything else should work just fine if it's shorter. And then on the ends, on both this end and this end, you will have these 4.5 inch, or 4 inch or 4.5 inch lag screws. And you'll put 4 of them into the end of the support beam here. And that's pretty much it. And I kind of measure it out, but make sure that you measure to make sure that it's going into the support beam at least 1 inch off the edge of the support beam. So don't put it right on the edge of the support beam. Bring it in just a little bit. Okay, so then the next step would be setting up the lower side rails. So there's a couple steps to this. You will need to rip the lower side rails, which I'll show in the next slide here. But this is a 2x4. It'll be ripped, and here's an estimated measurement. But that dimension should be checked against your inner leg right here. So what I'll do is now go to the next slide. So that inner leg, this gray right here, and this face should be flush, ideally. In a perfect world, that would be flush. Once that's ripped and cut, you'll do that for both sides. You'll drill a yellow screw right into the middle of this gray inner leg. And that's just to kind of tack it in. It's not going to be a super supportive screw, but that will kind of hold up your sides and offer a little bit of rigidity, but you still need to be careful because it's not really solid yet at this point. Okay. We'll go now to working on the middle leg, which is kind of intense because we have a lot of dimensions going on here. So I'll try to walk it out as best as I can. So for the inner leg, we actually have two sides. And what I'll do is I will show you the other side. There's a green side and a blue side. But on this green side, kind of walk through all the dimensions. So you actually have a number of pieces here, which when you look at the lumber layout, you'll see them all. But this is a 2x12 that's cut down. It's ripped, so it's cut shorter. This is a 2x12 on both sides here, a 2x4, a 2x6, and a 2x4. The bottom is 10 1/4 inches. And to get this angle, what I've done is I've measured off the height of each piece and then also how far it goes in. So if you just have a square piece, you can measure over 5 1/4 inches to get that angle and just draw a line and then cut it. This angle right here is 45 degrees. This notch is where the support beam goes. So make sure that's cut to the right width and the height. The support beam will come right up to this edge. So this 45-degree angle and this support beam should be pretty flush. It'll be level across there. And again, there are 1/8 inch spaces between each of the pieces. I'm trying to look. Oh, and then the yellow screws, you can put more in if you like, since there's going to be a number of weight. I just put it on the corners for now. But those yellow screws will just be on the edges. I kind of vary on this. I brought it in just a 1/2 inch from the edge, but from here it's an inch from the edge. Okay, this is just a note that, again, like I've mentioned in the past, these angles, this is a 45-degree angle, this is a 45-degree angle, that this should be flush. And arranging it to be as flush as possible is going to help, especially when we put on the bed sides and put on the upper rails. One thing to kind of keep in mind is that these rails could warp or bend a little bit. They're thin and it's kind of a long run for this kind of board. So you'll need to pull out the tape measure to make sure that this is at 40 inches as you check to make sure that these are flush. So there'll be a little bit of finagling there to get it just right. And so for the other side, it's pretty much the same exact as the green side, what we just looked at. Same things apply, only these are going to be different sizes. So you have 2x8, 2x6, 2x12, and you actually have a 2x4 down here, which you will rip to be, instead of 3 1/2 inches wide, it will be 1 7/8 inches wide. And once you have the middle leg built out, you want to set it about in the middle or as close to the middle as you can for now, but we're not going to tack it in just yet. You might need to find some other ways, like some clamps. For example, you might want to set up a couple C-clamps here just to hold it in place and to maybe hold this in place as well. So the next steps will actually be putting in the bed sides here, and that may want to push out this light green rail because it's not secured to the middle leg yet. So having some kind of clamp right here and right here will help keep it upright for the time being and prevent this from bowing out too much. It'll make your life a lot easier. Okay, so for the bed sides, it's really important to set up some kind of jig in some way to help create some very consistent cuts across. So you want these to be pretty much exactly the same throughout. That's going to help significantly when we put the upper rails onto the raised bed. And so this dimension right here is the widest dimension of this piece, or the longest dimension of this piece. That's as wide as it's going to be. This is a 45-degree angle. This is also a 45-degree angle. But these should be flush as well. And then go into the next slide here. I've put out a few measurements here so you kind of get a sense of what your cut needs to look like. This also needs to be kind of cut out. This is a 90-degree angle right here. It's 45 degrees to this. That's necessary to be able to get these two bed sides, both the starboard and the port side, to be flush to the support beam. So this angle should be flush. It shouldn't be sticking out a little bit further or going in a little bit further. It should be split right down the middle. And so that could be, once you get everything set up, it'll actually be a really quick cut. So, but just so you know that those two pieces, when they go together, should look about like this. And there's a certain layout of these boards. So we have 2x12s, 2x4, 2x12, 2x8, 2x4, and so on. This layout is specific, and there is no 1/8 inch gap right here. These butt up right next to each other. So all these pieces are they are in a place that makes the most sense. These 2x12s are on the ends, and they're also in the middle right here. That's just to maximize the amount of support we can get out of the middle leg and the two side legs before getting into these other pieces. You'll place the 2x2 piece of lumber in here. It's 96 inches, so it should fit right in. If not, you can trim it as needed. And that will be what we attach the lower part or the bottom of the bedside to kind of hold those two together to prevent them from bowing out. They shouldn't bow out too much, so this is just an extra measure of support here. And then looking at the screws for the top of the bed sides, this is the green screw. They're a little bit longer. You will need to pre-drill these, just like with every other screw with a pilot hole, and then countersink them so that way, this is just here for demonstration to show you where the screws go. But it should be inset a little bit into this so that way it does not stick out or protrude from the face of this piece of wood here. It's a lot of screws, but it's really going to start to solidify and make things a lot more rigid. And then for the bottom, we use yellow screws, and I've just put one in each one. The weight of the soil should be enough to hold it onto the support beam. If you feel like you need to, you can put in 2 for the larger pieces. If it were me, I actually might do that. But you want to place them about 3/4 of an inch from the support beam. So the center of the screw should be about 3-4 inches up here, and then it goes right into that 2x2 that's on the other side. And you'll do that for both sides. And then just as an extra measure, I want to put in 2 yellow screws here, which kind of cinch the bedside more to the side leg here. And so the screw won't actually come through, but you'll put a screw here and a screw here, and you'll do that on both sides. And you can actually put more in if you like, and that would really start to make this thing rigid. At this point, it should be pretty solid. And you'll get some more solidity or rigidity out of it when we put on the upper side rails. But for now, we want to look at fastening the middle legs. Right now, all you have is just kind of tacked in with some C-clamps or something else. And now we can move it into place. And what's really important is to align the middle of the middle leg, the center of the middle leg, with this line right here. There's 2 2x12s. And that's important because I want those 2 2x12s to rest on the middle leg right here. Then you'll insert a yellow screw, 1 into each side of the middle leg from the lower side rail, and then a green screw to further solidify it. And then you'll do a kind of a fancy maneuver here and use a turquoise screw, which is a different size and length than the yellow and the green screws. and you'll pre-drill a pilot hole at an angle into the bed side. That screw should not go through the other end. If it does, it needs to be pulled out, maybe use a yellow screw, and then sealed with silicone caulking so that water doesn't go through that hole eventually. But this begins to secure the middle leg to the support beam and to the bed sides. And then put these wherever you can. I've spaced them out here. It gets a little bit close to this edge here. 4 to 6 here, and a couple on the support beam should be sufficient. And this is on all sides of the middle leg. At this point, you can actually drop in the plastic. And so it's important, you have plenty of plastic, and it's important to give it enough slack here at the bottom, so that way when you put in soil, it's not going to stretch or pull anywhere else on this. And so you're going to have it's going to be kind of baggy in here. It looks kind of tight in here. I have no way of illustrating it very easily. But then you'll pull up each of the edges, and you'll pull out your staple gun and just staple throughout. Drop a staple every 4 inches, a couple staples every 4 inches. Again, it shouldn't pull too tight onto the plastic when you put in the soil, so the staples shouldn't really have to do a whole lot of work. And the same for here. You'll want to staple on the edge here. You're running into some funky angles, so there's going to be a little bit baggy here. So it's really not super baggy. We don't like tons of plastic in the bottom of it and on the edges, but enough to where you could hop into it and you're not going to tear anything anywhere. But once it is on the edge, try to remove all creases and wrinkles, and then make sure the staples are flush with the edge of the side rail here, so that when you put on the upper rail, you don't have staples kind of making it wobbly and that kind of thing. Next would be installing the HDPE liner. HDPE is food safe, but this is just a protective barrier for when tools are used, a trowel for example, and we want to prevent that black plastic from getting hurt. So there's a few little maneuvers here. You have your sheet, which you'll likely have to order. It will come in this size. You should not have to trim it. It should be this size already. If you do have to trim it, it would only be an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch for some reason if it doesn't fit inside the bed here. There are red screws, which if you look in your Excel document, you'll see what that is composed of. But it's composed of a 1/4 inch lag bolt that is 1 inch deep, as well as a sealing washer, which has a galvanized washer with rubber on the bottom. And what that does is it helps to seal and prevent water from going into the raised garden bed. You will pre-drill all of these with the plastic. So just you pre-drill with your pilot hole and your drill bit where you want to go. And then on the HDPE, on the back side of it, you'll put where this turquoise color is, you will place some silicone caulking, which will further seal if any moisture wants to get in, and that will go against the black plastic. And then you will drill on these red screws. Okay, we're getting closer. So now we'll start to install the caps and the upper rails. So this is the cap for the side leg. You will be using yellow screws for the top. I've put in 5 here. You want to make sure those go right down the middle of the center of this 2x6 right here. And then also there is a purple lag bolt. It's the same as what we use down here for the support beam. And they have a lot of shear strength. And so what I would like for that to do is to really secure the top rail, the lower rail, and then go right down into the inner leg, this gray one right here, right down into the center. It's 4.5 inches deep. And so that will add some strength to the rail, so that way over time it won't want to pull away from the side leg. Okay, for the side rail, you'll put bolts or screws underneath in through the lower side rail into the upper side rail. And I've placed them a couple screws here at the edges or close to the legs, and then evenly spaced them out here. You could put in more if you like, but I put them underneath obviously to stay out of the water and so that when people are working, they're not bumping into these screws. Ideally, you would also pre-drill these and countersink them. Then finally, you can put in the drain. So if you've completed the drain already, all you have to do is grab some pliers that are large enough to go around these bolts right here. So you'll want to put that in through the hole that you drilled already in the side leg, and then put in some kind of spare piece of lumber in here to kind of hold it up so that's parallel with the bed. It may want to kind of sag down. And at this point, the whole bed is finished and you can fill with soil, which would be really awesome. Hope you enjoy.